Welcome back to another episode of The Unplugged Creative. This week's guest is my dear friend Adriana Boring, who's been shattering her own glass ceiling in the male-dominated live events industry since she first got out of college. As a young 20-something-year-old woman who refused to leave her femininity at the door, she's had to learn how to work with and manage men 10 to 30 years her senior who didn't necessarily respect her or speak to her appropriately. She also shares with us a very personal story about getting into, living through, and eventually exiting a toxic, emotionally abusive relationship. Her story is one that so many of us working in male-dominated industries can understand. Let's get into it. Welcome to The Unplugged Creative, a podcast that explores the weird, wild, and wonderful things creatives go through to do what they love. I'm your host, Ariel Zadok, and this is the place to be reminded that wherever you are, you're exactly where you're meant to be.
It's so weird.
Well, welcome to the show, Adriana. I'm so happy to see you again, this time hopefully with no interruptions.
Yeah, well, it's not raining in LA, right?
It's not raining in LA.
Good, and Mercury's gone straight, so check.
We might actually be able to get through a podcast episode.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Well, I want to get started with where you're at right now, and then let's backtrack because I feel like you've had a lot going on and you're kind of in a really good place. So let's just let people know where you're at right now, and then we'll get through all the mucky stuff you did to get here.
Sounds great. Yeah, there's quite a bit of muck, but it was all worth it now that I'm here. And actually, I was talking to Brian about it the other day, knowing, like, I just finished my last show of the year, and I was like, if 22-year-old me could see me right now, I would know that it ended up all working out, but I was so not convinced that that was going to happen. So anyway, I just wrapped up my 5th year of freelancing, both in the live event industry and the graphic design industry. And this was the first year that I was really able to turn down work, which was a big deal. And like I've definitely turned down work in the past, but always with the like, oh my God, did I make the right decision by turning down the work for one reason or another? This year specifically, it was like, you know what, I want a week off. So thank you for thinking of me, but no, or whatever, and the world did not fall apart. So
what did it feel like that first time you said no?
It was the first time, I think, was super nerve-wracking. It wasn't necessarily this year, but I started to see my path go in one direction and some clients go in a slightly different direction. And, it was just kind of like, I don't think this is going to be a good fit anymore. And so in an effort to not burn bridges, just kind of waited till they reached out the next time and said, look, I'm not available. And I think slowly some clients kind of get the hint like, okay, this just isn't a good match anymore. Knowing that, the bridge isn't burned. And if things line up again, then that's how it works. But if not, no hard feelings. But it was stressful, and I stayed up late at night like, oh my God, did I make the right decision? What if I don't get work? What if this is a dead month? What if Brian's the only one making money this month? Like all of that. And it's worked out. Like in one way or another, it's evened itself out, which just goes to show that I don't know, there's a bigger picture at play, right? It's not just about doing things to make everybody happy. Sometimes you have to make those decisions for yourself so that you can kind of see your long-term plans play out.
Well, and as women, I feel like we're so used to making everybody happy. We are so used to bending over backwards to not stir the pot or not upset that ego or not ruin this thing. And it's exhausting. It is so exhausting playing that role.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's the thing is, that I've run into a lot, and I always preface any kinds of conversations with this, for better or for worse, as like, if you'll allow me to step on my feminist soapbox here for a second.
Do it.
But yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, I'm a pretty hardcore feminist, but I do work in an industry that's male dominated, and not only male dominated, but men who are 10, 20, 30 years older than me that sometimes I report to and sometimes report to me. And sometimes that role changes, and so it's hard to establish a dynamic where I can come in and say, hi, I'm 27 and I need your respect, or hi, I'm 27, I need you to tell me what you need, but I also need you not to be staring at my chest when you do it or something like that, So,
yeah, because you're also not, I mean, people can't see you, but you're also not a very masculine woman in the way that you hold yourself or the way that you dress or anything like that. You're a lady, you're a woman, you dress like a woman, appropriately, of course, but that in so many cases can count against us, which is total bullshit. But that is especially within events and film production and that male driven arena that can also count against you. So you're a woman, you're 27 or, even younger because you've been freelancing for 5 years at this point. So even younger.
Right.
And I also happen to wear heels.
Right, exactly.
So it's like a million points against you. That's like, how is anyone ever going to take you seriously, but your shit?
Exactly. And that is something that I not only like grapple with on every show, but also grapple with how much I am choosing to give a shit about it on every show. You know what I mean? Like there are times when I'm setting up for a show and I don't actually set up for heels anymore. I used to. I don't. But there are times when I'm like working.
Wow.
Yeah,
to do that in heels.
Stupid. It's so dumb. But I definitely used to do that. Anyway, there are times when I'm setting up for a show or I'm, loading in or I'm just backstage and somebody like a stagehand will come back and comment. And traditionally, like the stagehands that are hired on for a show, we don't necessarily know them very well. They're just brought on like as a local company that will help, and a lot of the times we're flown in, so we don't really work with the same stagehands on any given show. And so some of them I've noticed will like kind of test the waters and like call me sweetie or comment on my heels and oh my god, you're wearing heels, and and there are times where I'm like my fist clenched and I'm like, say that again. And then there are other times I'm like, oh my god, you're so boring, you're just like so much like the rest of them, and so I think that's come with age a little bit, where like when I was 22, I would stand on the table and scream at anybody who, not really, but want to scream at anybody who I felt was objectifying me. And now, as shitty as it can be, there are times when I'm just like, whatever, this isn't worth my time.
But I think that's just the reality of being a woman working in a male-dominated arena. And I keep saying arena. I don't know why. I just feel like that's the word that's coming to me. I don't know a better word to use. But I mean, look, I show up on set wearing like camping gear, basically, right, I'm wearing hiking boots and hiking pants, and I'm comfortable because I'm going to be rolling around getting dirty. Like who knows what I'm going to have to do. Right. Yet I'll still get comments like that. I'll still get things, and I shut it down real quick because I am also basically I don't want to say the head of the show, but I'm kind of leading everyone and calling all the shots and
you need to establish very quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I shut that kind of. Oh, I had a job. It was a tech scout, and someone, it was two people were talking. I won't say their names or positions or anything, but it was two men, both heads of departments, because that's the only people who are on tech scouts. I said something adding into a joke or something like that, and one of them turned around and commented back and said sweetie, and in a very firm voice, in a very don't ever fuck with me again voice, I said, don't ever call me sweetie. And then after that, he respected me.
That's good.
And I like that. Yeah. And especially after, because we hadn't worked together before. So after day one of us shooting, then he was like 100% respecting me. So, now we have a great relationship. But yeah, that was one thing. It was like immediately as soon as I heard that, it was like, nope, not going to happen. Not going to work on my set. Not going to tolerate it. I'm going to shut that down real quick, because you have to.
You absolutely have to. There was one of my last shows, actually, earlier this month. I was walking to my like production office essentially, and we were next to security, and the security was in-house. They were staffed by the venue, and this person was in uniform, and I walked right past them, just heading back to my office, and he goes, hi, how's it going? And so I responded, hi, how are you? He's like, good, you looking good, baby. And I was like, whoa, you're in fucking uniform, we're at work. So I turned around and I was just like, pardon me? And like very firmly, and he stuttered. And then it's funny to me, like he's like, I was saying that you look nice. I'm like, oh, okay, bye.
But he would never say you look nice to a man, whether he said it derogatorily or you look nice. Right. That would never happen.
Right. Yeah. It's something that, like, overall, I go into any work situation kind of with my guard up. Mm-hmm. And that didn't always used to be the case. Like, I would go in and just be friends with whoever, but then I learned that, like, that invited, interactions that I did not want any part of. And there's a lot contextually and culturally, I think, that needs to be dissected there, the whole, like, asking for it or, inviting it and whether or not that's appropriate, which it's totally not. But
not appropriate.
All of that, all of those kinds of arguments, I think there's quite a lot to break down. But what I've learned is that I just need to go in with my guard up. And a lot of the time that's hard because I work on shows where my best friends or my husband are on site, and they, people who I don't know will see me getting along with this group of people and think they can kind of dive in. And, it just kind of occasionally, I guess, have to set that reminder there that, like, I'm open to us becoming friends or good colleagues or whatever, but, like, we don't know each other yet. We still have to establish that relationship. Like, I'm open to us being colleagues that have a great time together, but you don't get to just walk in on day one and assume that we're good, mm-hmm. Because, and again, like, there's a lot that needs to be dissected there as far as what that means societally and culturally and where they're coming from, where they might think, like, hey, this person looks like she's a lot of fun and I want to be friends with her. And, but for me, having experienced it too often the other way, I'm like, nope.
And I think there's a degree of it that they don't know what they're doing, and therefore they don't know that it's wrong. Not that that makes it right by any means, but I think that there's a lack of awareness around how men specifically act towards women in professional capacities. I just don't think that they know, because they don't have to know. We move through the world in such a different way than men do that we are hyper aware of all of these different things around us, and they mm-hmm. just don't have to be aware of it.
That is called privilege. I'm pretty sure.
That is privilege. That's 100% privilege right there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it at play, and it's really interesting because specifically in the freelance environment, which I'm sure you will echo this sentiment, you're still having to be on your game. You can't, to an extent, let that kind of stuff bother you. And there's even times where, depending on how well I know the producer or the director or whoever, that I won't even bring that stuff up because I don't want to seem as though I'm not a team player. Oh, yeah. I've had stagehands come in and just say downright just degrading stuff. And one time I finally told a producer, and they were like, and it was well after the show, and they were like, oh my God, we would have fired that person. Why didn't you tell us? And I'm like, because we're all working. We're all on the clock. We're all putting together a program. Like, what right do I have to halt the production? And the truth is,
You have every right. But you know what? Also, that's not always the response you get. I've heard story after story after story in my profession within the film industry that all of us now are aware of, that producers brush it under the table, and that whoever it is, whether it's an actress or a crew member or whatever, has to grin and bear it. And they have to grin and bear it. Just finish the job. And sometimes that job is a 5-year contract. So for 5 years, you're dealing with this, but there's no one that's actually going to do anything for you. I think that's changing a little bit, and I really hope that it is. But it is ridiculous. It is just such bullshit. And I want to also back up for a second so that people have a perspective of what it is that you do in the environment that you work in, because you work in live events. So can you just give a quick recap of what that entails, or kind of what that is with corporate events?
Sure. So I work in, like you said, the live event production industry. And essentially that is any event, I do mostly corporate, but live events covers a lot of different umbrellas, concerts, trade shows, all that good stuff. I work in the corporate event setting, basically when large corporations want to get together and have, like, an annual leadership meeting or a meeting for their investors or their shareholders or whatever. They hire a production company. A production company hires me as a graphics op, and I handle all of the presentation material, sometimes other materials that are related to design that will go up during the event. So if the CEO is speaking and I'm going to say she needs a presentation I would be the one to handle that, make sure it gets up on screen, make sure it's quote unquote pretty. That's what everyone asks for. And then we strike it, tear it all down, and go on to the next one.
And it is so male dominated. I know a lot of people that work in that industry, and I worked for a production company that did live events. That was all, that's how I know you and
yeah.
all those people, and good old Bill Fay.
So yeah, I was going to say, we have to mention Bill Fay.
We have to mention Bill Fay, because there is a Bill Fay fan club. Absolutely.
Yep.
Anyone listening to this who knows Bill Fay is nodding their head with a giant smile right now, because he is just a wonderful human. But
literally the best person I've ever met.
He is.
Oh,
yeah. I adore him.
Me too.
So yeah, it is so male dominated. Besides maybe one or two women in the offices, I don't really think I know any other woman besides you. And it's not necessarily just men. It's like the OG old mentality, big dudes. So it's a very specific kind of man as well.
Yeah, I've seen, what's so funny, I think I'm pretty fortunate in this way, because the primary group of people that I work with is Brian as the video lead, my husband, our nearest and dearest friend Crash, who's on audio. He's the audio lead. He emceed our wedding. The producer is Adam. He married us. And then we've got Bill Fay on playback and projection, and then we've got Brian Winden a lot of the times, who is he did audio for our wedding as well. Just so many amazing people that I kind of, especially when I do shows with them, I kind of forget that all that other BS exists. And luckily, I don't know if it's something I'm putting out there or not, but I'm sure it has something to do with it. Lately, I've found myself on shows where the director's female, which is amazing. And there are a few female directors that I absolutely love and want to be in my next life. They're amazing, and then more and more people who kind of just have their wits about them as far as how we behave on site. And I would say that's probably become more prevalent in the last 2 years or so, where rarely I get a truly despicable thing. There are times when people say stuff and I'm like, you're dumb. But
yeah, those guys are fading out though. They definitely are fading out.
I still hear some people who kind of have those mentalities, and the worst thing they've said lately is I just can't say anything anymore. And, as annoying as that is to hear, I'd rather hear that and be like, oh,
sorry,
whatever.
So sad. Then you're clearly right. You are saying all the wrong things. So
right.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't feel bad.
Exactly.
Too bad, so sad.
Exactly. So that's more what I've encountered lately, which again, it must be something that I'm putting out there. For reference, I have a ginormous feminist tattoo on my arm, and then my whole work box is covered in we can do it, Rosie the Riveter, feminist stickers. There's no part of me that gives off any sort of yes, go ahead and come up to me and objectify me. So
yeah, I'm the girl you can walk all over. No, I'm definitely going to give you a problem.
Actually, MM LaFleur, that clothing company, had a great ad that said, I want to be mistaken for the boss. And so I've tried to carry, and of course it was built around clothing and the way you dress and all that stuff, but I've tried to kind of carry myself in that way. And I've noticed when I do have a sense of confidence about me and a sense of please don't mess with me, I'll get people from the venue that will come up and be like, hey, so where do we need somebody? Can you sign for this delivery? Thank you for the compliment of thinking I'm in charge.
Yeah, exactly. It's the way that we carry ourselves, and that does have an impact, and respect is commanded and it's earned.
Definitely.
And the way that you hold yourself is the way that people will see you and how they'll respect you. And that's just confidence and authority and kindness. Those are all things that can and will earn you respect.
I've noticed some body language things that I've tried to take on over time. I very rarely cross my arms when I talk to people, just so I don't seem very distant.
Well, that's a closed off motion. But if your hands are elsewhere, or if they're open, then you are open. Exactly.
Whenever somebody comes to my desk, unless it's I'm in the middle of rehearsal, I stand up because I don't want to be, looking up at somebody. And again, some people may argue that it's reading way too much into it, but things like that where, I say, let me back up instead of a bazillion times, or I say, pardon me instead of sorry. Those kinds of things I've noticed have started to make a difference, where there's only a certain amount of work I can do to affect what happens around me, but I can work on the way I present myself in a way that commands respect and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And language is so powerful, whether that's with your body or with your words. It is so powerful. And how we choose to use our language, again, body or words, it has an impact. It makes a difference.
Right. Exactly.
I want to back up to a little bit of a messier time in your path. And I think this may have been when you first started freelancing, but I want to talk about the toxic relationship that formed. And we don't obviously have to talk about names or anything like that, but I think that there's a lot of value in talking about this story and how it happened and how it affected and impacted your path and your journey.
Yeah. Okay. Let's dive into it. It's been a while, and I've actually... for those out there listening who know exactly what I'm going to be talking about, I've spent years in therapy working through it. All is good, so I'm totally fine to dive into it. But
so it's good timing then.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to name names for ego purposes, but let's go into it.
I would bleep them anyway, so.
Fair enough. Do you want me to start with an overview of how I met and fell into it? Or
yeah, let's talk about how you fell into it, because I know for me and most of us working in film production, we have things that are called showmances, and that is when you're on a job with someone. Usually it's a feature or a series. It's not a commercial, because commercials are way too short. But when you're on a show with someone and you have a little romance and you start sleeping together and whatever, and it's a thing, and usually it lives and dies with the production, but sometimes it doesn't, like in your case. So let's kind of talk about how it all began, because I think it'll be a very familiar story, and let's just walk through it.
Okay, sounds good. It started, I'll say, my senior year of college. I was not in the field I wanted to be in, and I switched up my major to land in live event production. That is a super long story short, but for brevity purposes, that's basically what happened. When I got into the live event industry, I was so ready to abandon my old life where I was going to be a teacher. I was living with my boyfriend, and everyone around us was buying ginormous houses in the suburbs. And it was like just the two of them, and they'd buy a house with 6 bedrooms. I'm like, what the fuck are you going to do with all that space? Whatever. But I didn't, that was just part of it. And I just didn't see myself fitting in there at all. And I couldn't see myself walking down the aisle with this person. I loved my boyfriend, just couldn't ever see it going anywhere. So I quit my job, broke up with my boyfriend of 3 years, I think, and moved out on my own within a month.
That sounds like what I did.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I was 24 and I left my boyfriend, moved out of the house and the big house that he bought, and quit my job and started freelancing.
Exactly. And that's just like, sometimes you just have to rip the Band-Aid off in the most cliche metaphorical sense. That is the only thing to do. If I had waded into any piece of that, I wouldn't have pulled the trigger at all. It just wouldn't have happened. So anyway, I'm 21, 22 or 20. Yeah, I just turned 22 when this happened. I'm on my own in every sense of the word. I pay all of my bills, which I had done for the most part before. I'm freelance, so I'm out there hustling for work, and I'm single, and I'm 22. So I fell in with this production company as a freelancer, and they were the owner of that company was very willing to take me under his wing and kind of show me how the industry worked. And there were a lot of things that I learned later are not how the industry worked, but I didn't know any different. And, I was kind of just still in this space of being grateful for any and every opportunity that came my way. So I just kind of ran with it. And, I'd work tiny shows on the weekend. And there was this other person who also worked within the company, and we had an attraction pretty quickly, but for so many reasons, it was not, like, in my head at the beginning that it was not a good idea. Like, I had already met Brian and was crazy about him, but he and neither of us were in a place to commit to a relationship, so it was kind of like, hey, I'm crazy about you and I could see us marrying each other, but not right now, which is hard. And I didn't have the emotional maturity.
Well, you were so young, so you wouldn't have the emotional maturity yet.
Right. And Brian was really empathetic about it, but ultimately it was just too much. And I'll get into that in a second. So this other person had we had worked together on show site for a while, and he had started hiring me directly with under the same company with, shows that he would be producing. And we always had so much fun when we would travel. And it wasn't toxic at first. It never is.
It never is. It's right. Fun and it's exciting and it's invigorating and it's dangerous. It's all those things.
Exactly. Like this person's company is paying me to fly around the country and work. And then at night we all go out and get drunk. And it's cool if we all show up at work hungover the next morning because we're all hungover, and that's just how it went. And so it was almost a contest, who could show up more fucked up the next morning, and I remember being proud of getting 2 hours of sleep. And now I look back and if I see that my call time is infringing on 8 hours of sleep, I'm like, no, I have to get 8 hours of sleep. And you have the stamina of a 22-year-old too. So it's let's
You're doing what every other 22-year-old is doing, but you're working in just a much different environment.
Exactly. And, the thing about this industry, which I'm sure you know too, is when you travel a lot, there's always this excitement to go see new places. We're not going out to chain restaurants. We're hey, my buddy knows this really awesome bar and they know the bartender and all that stuff. So there was a very deep level of connection with every part of that process, working together, going out together, meeting new people together, getting back together with them next time we were in the same city.
It's intense. They're very intense relationships, right. Whether they're friendships or sexual or whatever, they are very intensely built and intensely kept relationships.
Right. And actually, as a quick side note, whenever I was trying to explain this to my then boyfriend, he did not understand this world at all. And I was like, imagine you are in another city with a bunch of your favorite people and you build this world that you exist in, the show set, for a week, and then you tear it down and you go your separate ways and it never exists again. Mm-hmm. It never will ever exist again in that same way.
Exactly.
That's a huge mind fuck. It's the complete opposite of going to an office day after day after day or whatever. So anyway, we continued to travel and things were increasingly heating up, and he's much older than me. So there was that appeal too. And I'm sure the appeal was reversed in that I was much younger and all that stuff. So,
and you looked up to him as well. And there was that dynamic that he was teaching you and you were young and excited and you looked up to him. And I'm sure that was a huge ego boost for him.
Totally. I mean, there would be nights where we would hang out on site after and he would show me some of the, inner workings of the system that we had installed. And we would bring a bottle of wine and we would just work backstage. And it was fun. I would like to say I learned a lot, but I didn't because we were drinking, so it was this excuse to hang out with him. So we started to kind of see each other, but we kind of kept it we did keep it under wraps. I don't think we did a very good job. I'm sure everyone
everybody knows. Everyone thinks that they're so smooth, especially when it's the director and the lead actress. And you're like, yo, you guys think you're so smooth, but every single person here knows exactly what's going on. So you're not smooth. Exactly. Nobody is ever that smooth when it's like that. Because again, intense relationships. Everybody knows what's happening.
Right, exactly. So that's, we tried to sneak around or keep it under wraps. And at that same time, and this isn't shocking, again, everybody who's listening who knows the story knows this part of it, I was still trying so hard to pursue something with Brian because, again, there was that really deep connection where I was like, you are the embodiment of a healthy relationship and I'm crazy about you, but I cannot cut myself off from this thing that I'm currently pursuing.
Because it was also your livelihood too.
Exactly.
It wasn't just this hot, sexy relationship. It was your livelihood.
Exactly. They were my primary client. So I couldn't cut them off. That, you get to a point in any abusive relationship where all of a sudden you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, as far as severing the relationship. So toward the end of my first year in the industry, Brian and I called it quits. We couldn't make it work and I was heartbroken. So what does a depressed 22-year-old do after a heartbreak? I moved again into a ginormous apartment that I could not afford, but I loved it and continued to dive into this unhealthy relationship. And once Brian and I had severed ties, it kind of gave me license to continue doing this bad thing, right? Seeing this person who's way too old for me. And I started to, while the exhilaration was still there, I started to notice some really nasty traits. What's really interesting about this whole thing is that my mom has worked in the public service sector, if you will, her whole career. She's worked in shelters for victims of domestic violence, abuse, and things of that nature. So it's not like I was naive or not privy to any of the signs. And I should clarify right now that there was no physical abuse, but emotional, mental.
Yeah, that's not any less abusive. Yeah.
Right. So I just kind of like to make that point because I know there are women who are going through extreme amounts of physical trauma as well. Mm-hmm. And that was not something that I endured. So anyway, there were little kind of red flags that would start popping up. Like we would go out and the entire basis of our relationship was pretty much based around partying. So we would always go out together and it was more like we were dating, but we still really never invited anybody out with us. It was still very secret, even though at this point he was like my secret boyfriend, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and for so many reasons, I mean, we just didn't tell anybody. And so we'd go out.
What was that like for you, being in this and not being able to say anything? Was that your choice at all?
I think so. I think there was a level of shame for sure. You know, I knew from the very beginning what I was doing wasn't right. It was born out of toxicity and a need for attention, you know, on both ends. And I had severed relationships because of it. Like that was the reason Brian and I were no longer talking. And I was heartbroken about that. And so, you know, it was very much like the closer I could keep it to myself, the less I'd have to deal with it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, I'm the only one that knows about this, and I vent to my friends about it occasionally, but for the most part, like, he wasn't coming over to family dinners or anything like that. And that was equally hard because, I mean, I didn't want him at family dinners, but I see my family every weekend at least, and my grandparents and all of that stuff. So to know that, like, I would live this life during the week, and then I'd go see my family and would choose not to share that piece of it, there was just a level of disconnect all the way around, just not healthy, but I wasn't ready to acknowledge it yet.
And how is it impacting other parts of your life? Because that is going to be a huge part, because it's your relationship, your intimacy, your livelihood, and you're hiding it. How is that showing up for you in different ways?
And it showed up a lot in my overall happiness. I know now, because I don't do this, that the way I was behaving was so born of depressive behavior. Every night, every single night, I would go home and I would lay on my couch and just binge watch Friends and drink as much wine as I could. Like, I'd fall asleep with the bottle on the coffee table and I would just crash, and then I'd wake up on the couch and I'd go to bed. There was no form of process as far as unwinding from the day. It was just kind of like, whatever happened today, I don't care. I just need to numb it out. And for contrast, now every night I wash my face and I do a facial mask and I'll make tea, and Brian and I will hang out and we'll watch a show together. I mean, it was completely different.
Much different. Did you see yourself having these alcoholic tendencies at that point, or were you blind to that as well?
I think I was pretty blind to that. I think a lot of it was hidden under the guise of being in my early 20s, you know, and even in high school, my parents aren't going to like hearing this if they listen to it, but I partied pretty hard, and I think they kind of know that. But my friends and I all got into drinking at a relatively early age, and so for that entire period, it was like, oh, you're in high school, you're supposed to experiment. Like, oh, you're in college and you're dating somebody of age, you're supposed to get drunk, it's college. And then, oh, you're 22 and you're in this environment where everybody's drinking, and nobody talks about it as alcoholism, even though a good portion of them were definitely alcoholics, including the guy I was dating.
But you find excuses. It's always an excuse. It's always, oh, well, this is the way, this is what it's expected, this is the culture here, and it's excuse until you have none left.
Exactly. And I was very much, you're totally right, and I was very much just buried in the excuse of, this is my early 20s, these are my early 20s, and this is what I'm supposed to do. So it was depression topped with alcoholism, topped with just, I guess, which falls into depression, a general just lack of give a shit. I just didn't care about anything. And the thing that was hard about all of this is that I was good at my job, you know, and I've been designing in some form or another since I was a kid, you know, like I've always loved art and design. And so that's something that I know comes innately. And this industry of live events just played perfectly into what I'm already good at, which is working with a ton of people and being, not being tacked down to one desk or one job, that it all played perfect. So it wasn't like it was really showing up in my work. Mm-hmm. And as long as I was able to pay for my ridiculously too much apartment, then it was fine. So once we established that we were more dating, and to be clear, we never actually said the words, you are my boyfriend, or you are my girlfriend, or we are dating, or we are not seeing other people. Like, to this day, I don't know if he was seeing other women on the side. I have no idea, and I don't care. We just never had that kind of relationship,
Well, it was the dark secret relationship.
Exactly.
Even though it was constant, it was not an established, healthy, these are the boundaries, this is what the deal is, this is what my needs are, these are what your needs are. There was never anything like that.
None of that. Exactly. So the more we started, treating it like some form of a relationship romantically, the more we started like going out regularly. And so we'd go out to dinner and then we'd go get drinks. And then the more it started ending in just straight up shit show where I would say something, I'm not a very confrontational person, and I don't mean to paint this as like this was all his issue, because I'm sure I liked to poke the bear, but I would say something not trying to be confrontational 90% of the time, and he would just light up, and he would freak out and take a cab home, or he'd drive home and I'd have to take a cab home, and then he'd disappear. And then the whole night, I was like, what the fuck did I say? What did I do? And also, I'm worried about the safety of this person that I quote unquote care about, and I'm like, where did he go? What did I say? Why did I, what? And again, I don't have the emotional maturity to deal with this. Like there's this man who's 15 years older than me who is deciding that what I said was not okay, not giving any room to discuss it or have a conversation about it, or even acknowledge that we're drinking and we should talk about it in the morning or anything like that. You just freak out and leave. And then a few days later, it was like, I'd hear from him again, and there was no talking about it. I'd just hear from him again, and we'd get together and have a drink, and it would go all over. And it was like, there were nights, I'm not super proud to admit this, but again, it was years ago, so whatever. But there were nights where he would disappear, and I would think I'd know where he was going, and I would wrap this up so severely in my head, like, oh my God, he's drug driving, he's gonna kill somebody, or he's gonna kill himself, or what if he commits suicide? Or have his friends heard from him or whatever? And so like one night, I think I drove like to where one of his friends' apartment complexes were to see if he was there. And he was, or I didn't see his car, and that just sent me in a fury. So like I'm driving all over the Phoenix area, emotionally distraught, and like none of this is good.
Probably not in a state that you should have been driving in.
No, God, no. I mean, yeah, no. And so no part of it was, we never talked about any of it. And the cycle continued for months where we'd just get back together, talk about it. And then, there was one time, it was actually when we were all in Florida when I met you for the first time. Oh yeah, I called you from the airport and it was like, my life is a wreck.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. He said something. Oh, it was so dumb. I'm just going to rant for a second. We were talking about working a show together, and we were there for a site visit. And we were talking about working a show together where I wanted to be the director, and I thought this was a safe enough place where this guy that I'm at least emotionally involved with, I could say, look, these are the goals and aspirations I have. I want to be a director, and you also, aside from being the person I'm dating, are my biggest client. So just wanted to let you know. But of course, we were by the pool and we were drinking. So I said, I want to be the director of a show at some point. And he said, yeah, you're totally director material. Next time, I'll definitely put you in that role. Unless, of course, it's a Victoria's Secret fashion show, then of course I'll be the director. And I was like, what?
That's a weird comment.
Yeah, first of all, super weird and random, and why? Second, kind of sexist.
Very
and third,
sexist.
Yeah, just overall fucking dumb. And so
yeah, that's a jab right there.
Yeah. And of course it was. And so I was like, well, wait a sec. Why does it matter who the end client is? Like, I would be really good at that kind of at that kind of a show, a really fast-paced high show. And this, I should say, is way before any of the current press issues. I don't want to be the director of a Victoria's Secret show now. Never really did. But anyway, so we got into a ginormous fight where he said something to the effect of like, you're being kind of a dumb bitch right now, just outright offensive. And we were like one drink in, and I was like, all right, I'm leaving. So this time I left. Like, I got up, and as I was walking back from the pool, I was like, we're done. This is done. I have to be done with this. It was so insulting and so unsolicited that I had to separate myself from the situation and realize that this was a disaster. So it doesn't end there, though.
Was that the first time that you really, A, took a stand, or B, realized that you needed to take a stand, or had you been thinking about that for a while?
I think I'd been thinking about it for a while because of the fact that I'm not a confrontational person, but I'm a very sensitive person, and I have to talk about everything. Like, why did you wear blue pants instead of green? I want to talk about it. I want to know what led you to that decision. Help me understand what it's like to be you. And I do that to a fault sometimes, where people are like, please
chill out.
Please don't attach yourself to the color of my pants. It means nothing, I promise. So I think I had wanted to address it for a long time, but there was also this unhealthy desire to fix him, to get past the fact that he was much older than me and say, like, no, look, I'm smart and I can make you a better person. And we all know that doesn't work.
Never does. But how often do us women fall into that? And some men fall into that as well. But women especially are extremely guilty of wanting to fix people. And we can't, by the way.
Right. And that's, it took me a while to realize, one, that I have to fix myself first before I can even be in a position to want to lend an emotionally supportive hand to anybody else. And two, I can only be an emotionally supportive hand. I can't say, hey, why don't you join Alcoholics Anonymous? Or, hey, maybe we cook dinner tonight, or, like things like that. So that night, after I walked away from the pool, I was super done with all of it, but we were there with clients and we still needed to go out to dinner with them. And everybody met up to go out to dinner in downtown or whatever, except him. He didn't show up. And they were all like, Adriana, where is he? And I was like, I don't know, whatever. I can't get into it. I'm like holding back tears. I'm like, I can't. So we go downtown and we meet up with ended up being some new clients of mine. And that night I had given them my business card, and I kind of felt like, okay, this is a step in the right direction. Like, I can have another client and they don't have to be my sole provider. I think at that point I was ready to separate, or at least was realizing the first step of that, which is, hey, I'm not their employee. I'm a freelancer. I can seek other business.
You were empowered. You felt that moment of, hey, wait, exactly. I don't need to depend on this one person, because actually it's my job. This is what I do, and I can do it for anyone.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. That's exactly perfectly articulated. That's exactly what it was. And moreover, like, we were all around the table, we were drinking, we were ordering wine, and it was a healthy experience, like, where I was with my clients and I was with these new clients, and we were all like comparing the wine list, and it was more exciting. And I didn't feel this, oh, we're going to order booze and the night's going to end badly. Like, it just felt normal, which was refreshing. And then he fucking shows up and he's like peeking into the restaurant behind me. And everyone's like, is that his name? And oh my God, it is. So after dinner, we all said hi to him. They all said hi to him, and I went up and tried to hug him, and he pushed me off of him and was like, don't you fucking touch me. And I was like, all right, this is done. So I went back to the hotel and I just resolved not to call him or talk to him or whatever. And he blew up my phone and like, you stupid bitch, answer your phone. Are you that stupid? And then I'd answer it. And he was like, and he would say that to my face, like, you stupid bitch, why are you not?
And what was going on for you as that was all happening? And this is just being completely thrust upon you. What were you thinking in that moment?
I was shaking because because it was a secret, I couldn't talk to anybody. And we were on the East Coast, so I couldn't call any of my friends. They're all on the West Coast. And not only that, the client I was with was his business partner. So at no point could I bring this up. And I think finally his partner saw that I was like distraught. I was like, what's going on? And I kind of showed him like the overview of the text messages, and he was like, oh, he's dumb, just ignore it. And I'm like,
what a response is that? I mean, Come on, dude.
And from his vantage point, maybe he didn't understand. He knows him as being like this drunk, crazy person who turns into a different person when he drinks. So he probably saw it and was like, yeah, man, I'm at the receiving end of those messages all the time. Just ignore it.
It's just him. Just ignore it. But meanwhile, did he know the level of relationship that you guys were in?
No.
Okay, yeah, because this was a secret. So you were completely and utterly alone.
Right. And so I called Bill Fay, talked to him about it. I called you and talked about it. But I had to turn my phone off and call down for a wake-up call because I was flying out the next morning. I could not even have my phone on and get up because he was blowing it up. And
that is an abusive relationship right there. Even though you were trying to get out of it. I mean, that's exactly how it happens when you're trying to get out of it. Not in every case, but that fury of desperation and aggravation and assault in communication, that is what it can look like.
Right. I mean, it's the definition of the abuser losing control of the situation and reacting to that. So, I flew home the next morning and he called me a few days later and I just let loose. Like I screamed at him and I was like, you have a problem. You're an asshole when you drink. Like this is whatever. I let loose. And after therapy, I've learned that I have a tendency of not being able to balance. So I go to one side of the extreme, which is have a 9-month secret relationship with somebody who's 15 years older than me and my primary client, to absolutely no fucking way in hell are you treating me that way. And there isn't any in between until the dust settles. So that's one thing that I'm like consistently working on is I don't need to take it all the way this way, but I also don't need to take it all the way this way.
Yeah.
But there was something really, really cleansing about just screaming my head off at him. And I don't necessarily condone it, but if the situation calls for it, it feels kind of good.
But you also wouldn't have had the need to do that, and it wouldn't have felt as good if you were able to get out of it in a different point. Right. If you were in a healthier place. Or, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can be in a really healthy place and still fall into an abusive relationship. That is the fucked up truth about it, is that you can be in such a healthy place and still fall into this.
Yeah, my mom puts it perfectly. She says, to that exact point, she always says, no abuser ever walks up to the person they date and punches them in the face, and the victim says, yes, I want to be with you. You are my love. I think it's an Inconvenient sequel where, like, Al Gore puts the frog in the water that's, like, slowly heating up. It's not...
They don't know. You don't know.
You don't notice it until all of a sudden it's glaringly apparent, and sometimes it's too late to go back. So, yeah, I mean, essentially it was months and months and months of toxicity and drama and, unhealthy behaviors. And even after I screamed at him and all of that, it still wasn't over. I mean, we still did the song and dance for a couple months, But during that time, I had started seeing a therapist. I'd started seeing like a spiritual healer, and she taught me about chakras and all of that kind of stuff, which was interesting because I was raised Catholic. So that's the only form of spirituality I knew. And I wasn't going to do that, And so, she introduced me to that kind of just listening to your body and watching for different energies and imbalances and that kind of thing. And then I started seeing a dietitian too. And I didn't realize until much later that having a professional work with me on a mental level, on a spiritual level, and on a physical level was a game changer. Like I had body image issues, I was depressed, and I had no sense of anything higher than myself. So of course I'm completely lost. So it was gradual, but once I started talking through this in various stages with various professionals, I realized that there are things that I want to do in my career and in my personal life, and none of what I'm doing right now is serving me in no way, shape, or form. Like, he was not the only toxic person I was surrounding myself with. Everything I was... Exactly. So I knew that the first step in ripping off the Band-Aid part 2 is to cut off that relationship, not only with him, but with the company as a client. And the opportunity kind of presented itself, I thought, when I was asked I was asked by one of the clients where I was the day of show. And I was on another show. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And they were like, you're my graphics op for this show. We need you for this show. And I'm like, I don't have any record of you booking me ever. I'm like frantically searching through my emails, my texts. I'm like, oh my God, did I fuck up? And I didn't. They didn't ask me. So I followed up and I just said, hey, I need to know what dates you have me for so we're on the same page because, I'm sorry you didn't have a graphics op, but you didn't book me. And I said, also, I'm not available for this coming show. And I knew that was like I said at the beginning, my just quick way to be like, you know what, I'm not available. And I thought that was kind of like, okay, you're not available for this show. That's fine. Here are the dates we do have you for. Oh, but I was so naive because the client, the guy I was dating's business partner, sent me the most nasty and facetious and just ugly email, unsolicited, that I have ever received in my entire life. The subject line was extremely disappointed, and it wasn't even fucking spelled correctly. And it was, and it was just like, I brought you up from nothing. I guess sleeping with your boss is the way to get to the top for you. Don't ever talk to any of our clients. We'll pursue legal action and all of this. And it was the day before Thanksgiving that I got this email.
Wow.
So like,
just ugly.
And I like ran outside and burst into tears. And I was like, that's it. My freelance life is over as I knew it. And it felt like, even though I had made all these choices to separate and sever and get rid of the toxicity, I was still paying the price for it. Brian and I had gotten back together by that point. So I did have a sturdy emotional rock that I could say like, this is over. And he could say, no, it's not. Just trust me. And so what's funny is, I don't know if you get like seasonal nostalgia or like weather type nostalgia where it's like a certain temperature outside and you're like, oh, this reminds me of the time that I met my best friend, you know?
Yeah.
Every Thanksgiving, I always get this uneasy feeling. And then it slowly, over the years, every Thanksgiving has been quelled by this, fuck yeah, I'm doing it despite of all of these people feelings. And this year was the first year that I turned down clients with no hesitation for my personal well-being or the schedule I wanted. It was the first time that I made more than Brian, which I want to say for the record that is not something we compete about, but as far as, and he's completely supportive in that way, but as far as everything I stand for in a feminist perspective, to shatter the glass ceilings for myself is a huge deal. And so this Thanksgiving I was like, I got this.
Yeah. And sometimes it does take a long time of proof to actually believe it, but I think that you have to have the belief in order to get the proof sometimes.
You're totally right. And it was not, I mean, even as recent as earlier this year, there would be times where I'm like, what am I doing? Like, none of this is paying off. I don't feel like I'm where I want to be. And then I have to look at it in chunks and go, no, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was falling asleep drunk on the couch. Now I don't do that. Or if I do, it's because we're at a really awesome party or whatever.
Yeah, it's not an everyday thing. It's a rare thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just kind of like a thing that I've had to look back on and take a lot of the learning from the pain and hardship and struggle and realize that I had a role in it. You know, it wasn't all the people around me, but work to gain some emotional maturity and some general awareness for my role in the way my life is shaping. So if I want to be my own boss and call my own shots and make the money I want to make and move in the direction I want to move, then I have to make hard decisions at times. But ultimately, as this is now shown, it will work out, you know.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think your story is one that a lot of people, different aspects of your story, they're all things that people can definitely relate to. And I really appreciate your honesty and your openness because it's not easy to share things like that. So I really, really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. I like to give people a little challenge. So what is something that you would like to encourage people to do in the next couple of weeks here?
Ooh, okay. This sounds really cliche, but if you have a project that's like on the back burner, just make the first step in starting it. Like for me, I've always wanted to sew. I'm like obsessed with garment structure and all of that kind of stuff. And I've always wanted to sew. And I have my mother-in-law's sewing machine and it's just sat there and it's broken. For me, the first step was to just take it in and get it fixed and sign up for a sewing class. And so I really haven't done anything active, but I haven't let it to continue. So if there's a little project, doesn't matter how big or how small, if there's something that is on your list to start that you know you'll get a lot of joy from, just take the first step and then see where it goes from there.
Yes, I love that. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I totally agree. My dad likes to remind me, this is like the thing that he says all the time. And he always prefaces it with, oh, it's like an old Chinese proverb. And he goes through the whole story because he's freaking adorable. And he doesn't ever get the quote right, but it doesn't matter because he always says the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step.
Yes,
that's the actual quote. Maybe he does get it right. I don't know. But, you know, he always says that. And he always says the story about the old Chinese proverb. Pretty sure it's Confucius, by the way. But it's so true. And it's so perfect. And so I think that's a wonderful thing to leave people with.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you again. It was such a pleasure to catch up with you, as always.
You too. I adore you and I appreciate you. And I'm so happy that you're in my life. Thanks, Bill Fay.
Yeah, go Bill Fay. We love Bill Fay. Where there's a Bill, there's a Fay.
Thank you so much for listening. Head on over to theunpluggedcreative.com to check out the show notes and link up with each week's creative. If you're digging this show, I would totally love it if you left me a 5-star review on iTunes. That's going to help people learn about this show and probably help other creatives say yes to doing it who don't actually know me yet. Special thanks to James Granger for his original music. I'll be back in your feed in 2 weeks. Until then, keep on that creative path of yours. You never know where it might lead.